Well, I would like to outline to you how we're doing, really. That was the purpose of this, was to gather everybody that wanted to listen and talk to you about how we're doing, how the company's doing, how the staff are doing. I will talk to you about PPE because it seems to be the big subject on the news and the radio endlessly. So I'll update you on where we're up to on PPE and infection control, which is actually the far bigger picture of the PPE is only part of infection control as a bigger picture. And then I'll talk to you a bit about how we might be able to help you more and some of the nice things that the staff have been doing to support families a bit more. And also to talk to you about how we're supporting our staff. So let's start on where are we up to? We're week 5 of lockdown, and of course we had a number of our elderly folk already locked in. They don't go out much, and they've been a long time in their own homes and now without families visiting. We're obviously extraordinarily proud of our team. They're doing a really good job, and right at the beginning of the very strict lockdown, of course, we lost a number of our staff to their own health conditions. So some people had those letters saying, you should stay in for 12 weeks. So those people, we know that had a bit of an impact on our staff team, along with those people who had symptoms or families had symptoms of anything. And that was that initial sort of level of losing staff. We had about 15 people off in that first couple of weeks. Some won't be back and some will. So we're managing pretty well, and I think overall the big message is good news. We've hardly cancelled any visits. The staff are bearing up well. Those people who were off with symptoms and mostly symptoms that turned out to be things like hay fever or coughs and colds, other things, are now back at work and healthy. And there's been, because of the lockdown is working, of course there's less people becoming sick. So that's a testament to, I think, good infection control and good sort of discipline around the lockdown. We've got the office open, and we've split the office team into, we haven't been able to make everybody work at home. It's just not physically possible to run this business with everybody out. So we have about 12 people in our office team, which are people you speak to probably on a day-to-day basis. They're in 2 teams, the red team and the blue team. I'm leading the red team and Cara's leading the blue team, and we're doing a week in the office, so about 6 of us in the office, and then a week at home. And that was designed to try and stop everybody in the office team being sick at the same time, and it's working very well actually. We've not had any sickness in the office team at all, so they're quite protected. They're going home and they're coming to the office and then they're going home again, so that's working pretty well. The office is open from 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening. And people are covering that phone either way, whether they're at home or in the office. And then the normal out of hours is working pretty well. So it's exactly as it normally is. 6 o'clock in the morning, someone takes the out of hours emergency phone. And then again, when we close the office at 6, someone takes it till 11 at night. So the out of hours emergency cover to support the care team and yourselves is up and working as it would normally. There have been some issues around phone calls coming in because you've got a team that are in 2 places, and when you're out, you're in your own home. So there's 6 different homes to deal with. So we would ask you that one of the things we could really do with is, if you're thinking of phoning us, if it's really not particularly urgent and it could wait, then email us, and your message won't get lost because the emails are coming in and they're centralised, whereas the phone calls, it can be difficult to get to the right person if that person's home that week. So bear with us, but it does seem to be working pretty well. Medication is an interesting one. We started off with a lot of issues around pharmacies and big queues at pharmacies, and the last thing we want is our carers on your time hanging around in long queues to pick up medicine. So we've now got to a position, I think we're at a position now where all of the pharmacies that we need to use are delivering, which is working pretty well. So they've been very good. And a couple of the pharmacies who didn't deliver, we've just asked families to switch to the ones who are, and basically they've lost the business, because actually if one pharmacy can put the meds in a van and drive it around, then that's the one we're using. So we've eliminated the need for the carers to go near the buggy pharmacies as much as we possibly can, which is good news. The MAR sheets, if your family member has medication help from us, the MAR sheets are due to be redone now. They're pretty much done, ready to be printed for May. So do let us know by email urgently if you know of changes to medications just before we print off the next lot for May. But we're pretty on top of medication, which is great because it was presenting a problem at the beginning. We've had lots of compliments, which is always nice. It's always important to give people the pat on the back that they deserve. And right at the moment, when someone gets a little, when someone gets a compliment, someone bothers to email in and say, oh, they made such a difference, or they're keeping my mum smiling, or whatever that is, it's really helpful to know, because we can then pass the compliment on to the team. And Cara is our new manager. She's been doing a roundup every Friday and making a point of picking people out and saying, oh, there's been nice compliments for this one and this one. So it's become like a competition now, who can get the most compliments in a week. So do let us know if someone's doing something nice and keeping you informed. I know a lot of families are ringing when carers are there so that they can help with phone calls, and that's been quite nice, so that they know they get a bit more of a relationship building with the carers, which has been really nice. Let's talk about PPE, the dreaded PPE. I think the first thing to say is that, let me just update you really on what we mean in home care by PPE, because I think there's so much on the news, it gets a bit confusing. We are not an intensive care unit, so we're not having people in, the full garb. So gloves and aprons and good infection control are the mainstay of the personal protective equipment that we need in home care. And we've increased the number of aprons and gloves that are available. Everybody's got plenty. And we have a good supply of that. There was a very dodgy week where I didn't get a lot of sleep wondering where I was going to get them from, but we now have them. So that's good news. We have the gloves and aprons. I'll talk about masks in a minute. Hand washing and keeping the people that visit the home down and keeping the home clean, so the work surfaces, are probably the mainstay of why we've been successful in infection control measures to date. The beauty of doing home care is that each person is in isolation, and so you've got this opportunity. You haven't got them spreading the germs like a care home from one room to another. So we're in a much stronger position than the care homes. So good hand washing, keeping the numbers of people visiting down, and keeping the home clean are by far the biggest success for infection control. I've had to have some really difficult conversations with some families about not visiting, because if families visit, you're opening up the germ pool to more and more people. So if you go shopping and you go to visit mum, and then the carer visits mum, and then that carer then goes to a next person, I've had to have some quite firm conversations with families to make sure that they really understand the government guidelines are followed. And to the point where it was sort of them or us, either families visit or carers visit, but both is just not safe for everyone, and it has an impact on everybody else's risk of everybody else's family. So we've been very firm on that, because it's not my rules, but it is a difficult, and my heart goes out to everybody. We're all in this together, and it's not an easy situation to deal with. But by doing it, it is helping the health and well-being of everybody. I can tell you that today, of the 107, I think, people that we're looking after, there is not a case confirmed or suspected amongst any of the people we're looking after. I think that's really good news, and I think you should take great comfort from that, because it does mean that what we're doing is working so far. We are expecting someone in that elderly group who are extremely vulnerable, we are expecting it to spread at some point, but we're into week 5 and we're doing a really good job, is the message. So when it does happen, if it does happen, we're ready for it. So that brings me on to masks. So the idea would be that we would, if we do get someone who contracts COVID, or same as we would with any other bug, we've had people in the past with sickness and diarrhea, and we've never spread it around the community. So we're good at infection control. If someone does become unwell, then the carers have masks to use to protect them from catching the bug, and then of course by default then passing that on to other people in the client group. So I'm fairly confident that we have plenty of masks. I managed to get a delivery of 1,200 masks last week. They're sitting there, but we are following the guidance very closely. And it has changed. It's changed a couple of times in the last couple of months, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on the government guidance around masks. But for now, we have sufficient masks and a sufficient stock of masks to follow the guidelines as they are now. If you remember that a mask is there to protect the worker from contracting the disease, and so if someone has got symptoms, that they're being looked after person has got symptoms, then we would wear a mask. they're all disposable. They would all be bundled up into the rubbish bags, in double bags, and they'd be left in that home. The person would wash their hands and their forearms and move on to the next place. And of course, there's a journey and a getting in and out of the car and the fresh air in between. So they're in a very strong position to have reduced the risk of transmission of that disease from one place to another. Any carer who has any symptoms at all is off. They're off sick. We've got the sick pay situation under control and all that, and people will be off for the 7 days or the 14 days depending on their circumstances. And again, we're watching that closely to make sure that if the government changes any of that advice, that we're ready for that. So I think that's all I've got to say about PPE. I think it's really important to bear in mind that when you hear the news that we're in a different environment to the care homes and the hospitals. I think that's so important, and be reassured that, you know, so far so good. We're doing really well, and the carers are being absolutely vigilant. It's very frightening going out into the community doing this job at the moment. They're under a lot of pressure from families, perhaps not to go to work, family members being worried about the care staff. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So how are we supporting families, and how's it changed what we're doing? Well, we've certainly had contact, I think, with a lot more of families. So we might have 3 or 4 siblings now, and I can see some names on the screen where we've got to know you better, because we've now got conversations with 3 or 4 siblings where there was one. So I think that's increased the volume of phone calls between families. So again, if you are one of 2 or 3 siblings working with us to help your mum or dad or relative, it might be a good idea to group your emails together so that we give the same information to all the family, which has worked quite well for some people. Which shopping was another big, so the pharmacy queues were only matched by the shopping queues. So we had we had several problems with shopping, so we seem to have solved them for the time being. We are bundling together shopping visits into a group so that we can then send one carer to one supermarket in Thorpe Bay, one in Westcliff, one in Lee, and one up in Hadley, 1 day a week. And so that means that you're exposing less people to the shopping risks, which is good. And then what they'll do is they'll be able to go and collect, they'll have a 2 or 3 hour slot where they've got an hour or so for each person in effect, and they'll go from house to house, gather the lists, go and do the shopping, and then go back and be able to put the shopping away. So that seems to be working quite well, and we've managed to sort of push the negotiation with the local supermarkets to get them to actually let the staff go to the front of the queue and get on with it, because again, these long queues are very frustrating when you've got a carer with a ticking clock. Really, they've got to get on with the job. So they've been pretty good, and if we hit resistance, then they have me to answer to. I have to give them a ring, talk to the manager. I've met all these people, these managers of people on the phone. I've never seen them before in my life, but now we have a working relationship with you. Please let my staff in. So cash for shopping presented a bit of a problem because we had a number of clients who the shopping was done with the client going out with the carer, and so they would use their cards, so their bank card or their touch free, the cash point card. So of course we had to be really quick at stopping that happening in case people gave away PIN numbers or you had fraud on people's bank accounts. So we've set up a situation which you may or may not have used with us, but you're welcome to let us know if you'd like to do that, is that we've arranged for families to pay money into our account, and then we will collect the cash. I go to the cash point machine and try not to get bashed over the back of the head. It's good actually because everybody's locked up. I haven't been bashed over the back of the head for the cash yet. So I'll go to a cash point machine, grab the cash, and then take it round and put it in the house when the carer's there, so it's all accounted for. And we've just charged a £10 admin fee for that because it's quite time consuming, but it seems to be working quite well, and it does mean that there's cash in the house that the carers can then give out with the list, so they can trundle off and get the shopping. That's worked quite well. So several families have done that. So if you'd like to be able to do that, do email me and we can set that up. IT support is quite an interesting one. We had a very nice, actually I can see Jane there, and Jane's mum and dad, I think. Sorry, Jane. We had an iPad delivery to Waitrose, I believe. One of the carers picked it up, went and sorted it out, and set it up so that the family can talk to someone on a screen, which is quite nice. We've had similar things with using iPhones and various things. So if you would like to see your mum or dad or grandparents or auntie, whoever it is we look after, we have got technology around between us that we can set up some WhatsApp phone calls or iPhone calls, whichever device. And if you're having a family Zoom quiz, which we did, which was mayhem, then let us know and we'll see if we can get them joining in. Because I think, this is not going to stop quickly, this situation. I think it's going to rumble on for a while. So actually being able to set people up with some basic IT things to help them to see you would be really nice. So we've done a few. We're happy to do some more. The more sensitive subjects are really difficult. And when I read this out earlier, I got upset. So if I get upset, I do. You can't do this job and not be touched by the deeply emotional human stories, and we deal with that all the time. And then all of a sudden, it's in every news bulletin. People's end of life care is always difficult. Whatever it is, whether it's in a hospice or in their home or in a hospital. We have engaged Catherine Wood, who is a senior hospice nurse, to help us should we need more help with helping people as they're dying at home of anything. I mean, that could just be a very long, happy end to a long life. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not talking necessarily about people dying of COVID. We're just talking that we look after very elderly people, and there will be some deaths along a year anyway. We've asked Catherine to help us to upskill a bit, to do a bit more training with staff, which she's done, and it was wonderful, and also to help you or to help your families should we get to a situation where someone is perhaps looking towards the end of their life at home. You will have seen on the news that there are lots of news stories of people dying on their own in hospital, and it's very distressing. Because we are in their own homes, we're not going to have to say that to anyone. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to be where you need to be at the end of someone's life, to make that the memory and the experience of the end of someone's life as comfortable and as rewarding as it should be. As Catherine said to me in the training, she said, you only get one chance to do this right. We can't go back and do it again. So we are always very conscious of how people's health is going and how they're deteriorating. And should that situation arise for somebody that you love and we look after, of course, we will do everything we possibly can to make sure that whoever needs to be there will be there. So don't worry too much about what's being on the radio and the television about people dying on their own. That is very different rules in hospitals, possibly in care homes, and certainly the hospice is being used differently at the moment. So we may face that, but we've got this wonderful extra support in place to make that happen. Should it happen? But they're all quite well at the moment. Everybody seems to be doing pretty well, so it's quite good. They're a tough bunch, aren't they? I love looking after the 90-year-olds because they're just tough as old boots, really. It's the rest of us that are struggling. The client services team then will come up with any innovations. They'll be very interested to know of any innovative, unusual things that you think might make your mum or dad or family member's life a bit more comfortable, or yours, in fact. So do get in touch with Cara, Cassie, Michelle or Ellis. They're our client team, and they will find a way round whatever it is that you think we can do to help you. How are we supporting our team? There's plates. Can you see the plates spinning behind my head? Actually, that painting looks a bit like plates spinning. There are 60 plus carers in the community, and we are extraordinarily proud of every one of them. They are doing an amazing job. In order to keep everyone calm, you have to give an impression that it's just business as usual. And actually, there are elements of what we're doing that is business as usual. We look after people in isolation all the time. We're quite good at entertaining people and looking for ways to keep people company. That's what we do. And keeping people's homes clean and tidy and preventing infection is pretty much our bread and butter. So by having a business as usual approach, it seems to have the ripples in that pond are that everybody's actually quite calm and cracking on with the job. I think you would be very impressed by the commitment of this bunch of human beings who have committed themselves to looking after your relatives and by doing their job. And they love their job. They're very committed to this job. It's a vocation. It's not just any old job. And when the government, actually interestingly, when the government started talking about volunteers, my heckles rose because I was worried that people would underestimate the skill of what these people do. It's not just any old job that someone can, step off their other job and do and then go back to their other job. They're very highly skilled in what they do, and they make it look easy. When they're then under pressure from families to not go to work, and there's all sorts of schemes in place to not go to work, you would expect across the country and across the world there will be people making all sorts of spurious claims not to come to work purely because they're frightened of coming to work and they've got a lot of pressure from families. We've seen very, very little of that, very little, if any. People have genuinely had a bit of time off because of someone in the family's not well, and they've come back to work, and we haven't had to cancel any care, all but a handful of things that were impossible to cover. But generally speaking, they're completely committed. And we're trying to support them. So there is Charlotte on here somewhere. Oh, she's disappeared off my screen now. But Dr. Charlotte Harkness is supporting us. She's a clinical psychologist, and she's been really helpful in creating some little videos to support the team, looking at subjects like anxiety and fear, and trying to support us in supporting them. She's been really helpful to me. We've had a conversation on the phone once a week, and it's really nice to just have someone to go, this is how am I going to manage this? And that voice of that sort of calm reason is really nice to have around. And I think I created the 7 dwarfs of, when the staff meeting on Monday, we did one of these, and we created the 7 dwarfs of COVID, which were something like grumpy, you can imagine, grumpy, shouty, teary, moody, stroppy. Any sign of these people turning up in the care team, anybody feeling a bit sort of frayed around the edges, is a good sign that they need to take a step back and have a day off. And I think I've heard on the grapevine of other registered managers is that lots of companies have cancelled their leave. Well, we haven't cancelled leave. We've had the advantage of having people offer us their time because they were going on holiday and they haven't gone. So that's really helped with cover. But I am encouraging my staff to take their leave, take some time off, which is quite difficult because where there's nowhere to go, you might, if you employ people yourselves, you might, there is that point of gathering together all your annual leave, and then everybody, when this is over, everybody thinks that EasyJet and Chewy are going to whisk them away for a month. Well, that's not quite how we need it to work. So we are encouraging people to take a bit of downtime, and I would encourage you as well to eat well, keep hydrated. Your immune system needs that. And recognising the signs of when the workload is becoming a bit too much is something that is an ongoing ear to the ground. So one of the things that Charlotte suggested was that we encourage families, to say if you hear of anybody who perhaps is a bit brittle around the edges, just quietly let me know. It's not necessarily a complaint. It's really useful feedback, because if I'm hearing that someone's a bit grumpy or a bit short or a bit tearful, then I can do something to help them. But they don't always admit they need. We're all like that, aren't we? We don't always admit that we need a bit of help. So just do keep an eye on anything like that, and certainly for yourselves as well. This is tough. Being stuck in a house with people you love or don't love, or on your own, is not easy. We have got a counselling helpline available for our staff, and we're hoping that they're using that. That's confidential, so it doesn't tell us if they do. And exercise and fresh air, even after a long shift of working, we're trying to encourage people to still take that walk around the block. I'm very, very lucky that I live about 2 roads back from this very sunny Southend seafront, and watching the tide go in and out is a very good leveller, isn't it? It's been pulling in and out of there for several hundred years. Everything's going to be okay, is what I think when I see that tide. So I'm lucky to have that on round the block, and we're encouraging people to do that. So that's, I think, everything I wanted to say, 100 miles an hour. Before I sort of sign off, I just was going to check with Austin whether there were any questions or comments, things I haven't covered.
There is one, yeah. We had a question from Liz, not Liz Cherry. Liz, I'm afraid I don't know your surname, about carers' access to COVID testing.
Oh, good. That's very good. I did forget that. So we heard this beginning of this week that we are able to put people forward for testing if they have symptoms and if they are within 5 days of those symptoms starting. So we will take advantage of that if that if that occurs, it isn't a test to tell you whether you are now immune from the disease. It's just a test to say whether you are currently experiencing, if you're testing positive because you have the disease now. So the criteria is quite tight, but we do have access to that, and they've now got a centre in Southend. When they first told us about it last week, the nearest centre was almost into London, but they've now have a centre in Southend. We haven't had to use it yet, but we certainly will, and I think it will be one of those things that what it might really help with is if a family member is sick and the person is supposed to be isolating because a family member is sick, if at least that family member will be allowed to go and get tested. That's part of the criteria. If they're negative, then the carer can come back to work, because I think that caused a lot of problems, didn't it? People having 2 weeks off just because their child had a snivelly cough or something. So yes, is the answer. We have access to it. It has some limitations, but it's there, which is good news.
Caroline, one other from Lisa Evans. Lisa asks, are the carers compensated, or are carers compensated during this time? Are they paid any more?
Ah, that's interesting. Well, they're paid what they're normally paid, so the normal hourly rate. They have all just had a pay rise because it's April, that time of year. So we've tried to move, well, you will have noticed that our fees to you went up. And that was in line with them having a pay rise, which is good news. So they will all feel a bit better off, I think. We'll keep an eye on if there's any reason why they would have extra expenses. We'll keep an eye on that. But for the main part, they've had a pay rise, and I suppose unlike a lot of people in their households, they're actually earning and working, which is good news, I think. And we're certainly giving them all the people who can't work for any reason, we're giving them all the support we possibly can to access all the benefit systems, because that's a bit of a minefield. But Andrea, who's our manager in HR, is really on that. She knows exactly where to send people for all the various benefit systems. I hope that answers the question. But they have all had a pay rise, so they should feel better.
There aren't any other questions outstanding, I think, that you haven't already covered. So
that's good.
I think we're in good shape. So just a quick, if anybody else has anything, now's the time. But of course, you can always get in touch with us separately.
Very good. Okay. I would really like to thank you all. We are absolutely privileged to look after the people we look after. They're a great bunch. Captain Tom might be walking around his garden, but I know what the others are up to, and they're all doing amazing. They're all supporting, aren't they? They're an amazing bunch. We're very lucky to have you supporting us, and we look forward to this being over and some huge Doris party, I think, when it's over. If this has been useful, it's nice to see you all. It's been useful for me. It was quite nerve-wracking to think about it, but actually doing it's not too bad. We'll do it again. What we'll do is we'll send another invitation to see what subjects might be useful to talk about, and we'll keep you posted. I think the big message is this team are doing a really good job, and I'm really proud of them. And we're very, very grateful for the opportunity to say thank you to you for giving us work to do. We're very happy with that. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to sign off, and I will see you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Oh, look, lots of lovely waves.